Thank you, Andrew, for that amazing presentation and sort of setting the stage for what's about to sort of reveal itself over the next 2 days. So it's really my privilege today to introduce and welcome you to today's session on bias and integrative health equity through a technology lens, bridging the gap. My name is Darshan Mehta. I'm the Medical and Education Director for the Osher Center for Integrative Health. And it's really exciting. This is, as Andrew already pointed out, we're really gathered here to explore a pivotal topic on the intersection of health, technology, and equity. And as we all know, integrative health focuses on a holistic, patient-centered approach, and yet technology's increasing role in healthcare presents opportunities and challenges to this mission. So our session, today, this session really has three primary objectives. What I'd like to do is first explore the intersection of technology and integrative health, and how can these emerging technologies enhance patient-centered care while addressing the disparities plaguing our healthcare systems. We want to address the bias and equity in health technologies. Where do biases emerge in digital tools, artificial intelligence, and other innovations, and what strategies can we use to counteract them? And fostering collaborative innovation for health equity. Can we co-create equitable, inclusive solutions that can meet the needs of diverse populations, particularly in underserved communities? So this session will really explore innovations addressing health disparities, including mobile health applications, AI-powered diagnostics, and telehealth platforms. Each of these tools offers tremendous potential to bridge access gaps, but they also come with challenges: the digital divide, algorithmic bias, and concerns about data privacy. This is where we need your insight as practitioners, as researchers, as technologists, as advocates for health equity. We have tremendous opportunities here: telemedicine expanding access to integrative care, AI-powered personalized treatment plans, wearables tracking holistic health metrics. But there's the challenges: the digital divide, the algorithmic bias, and data privacy. So we can drive solutions that really incorporate inclusive design, cultural humility, collaborative research, and ethical AI, all essential principles for ensuring that technology works for everyone, not just a privileged few. So as we begin this session, I encourage you to think critically and collaboratively throughout today's discussion. Our work here has the potential to shape the future of integrative health and ensure that it remains both innovative and equitable. So with that, I would like to invite our first keynote plenary, Dr. Sekai Chideya.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Glad to be here, and thank you for coming. I was really hoping, though, it was going to snow. I was excited. I was like, it's December, Boston, snow. And of course, all the people in Boston are like, no, please don't snow. So no snow. Oh, well, next time. But as mentioned, my name is Sekai Chideya. I am a program director at the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health, which is at the NIH, and we fund a lot of clinical and basic and mechanistic research regarding complementary and integrative interventions, including many that utilize technology. So I was asked to do this keynote today, and I'm thrilled. And I'm going to be talking about something that's increasingly relevant in the context of complementary and integrative health, and that is navigating technology in a way that is responsible and mindful, and that maximizes scientific rigor, impact, and importantly, equity. Okay, there we go. Sorry. So I probably do not need to provide any statistics here because Dr. Wayne already talked about this, but technology has become so ubiquitous. It's become almost indispensable for many of us here in the United States. It goes without thinking that, we do certain things using technology. Surveys have shown that over 90% of US adults now own a smartphone, and over 80% have home broadband. And while those are averages and there are variations between sociodemographic groups. The reality, the bottom line is the majority of people in the United States, adults in the United States, are connected in some way. And there's increasing use across all fields and all indications, including in complementary and integrative health and conventional healthcare and research. So is this new? No, as Dr. Wayne, I think better, his slides were better than mine. Technology in health is not new. As soon as the telephone became mainstream, providers were taking phone calls from patients from their 57 Chevys, like, this doctor, dapper doctor on the left. But, there were pulse oximeters and digital thermometers and EHR systems, all started getting released around the 1970s. And since then, healthcare providers and researchers alike have been using technology and computers, all the time. What has changed, though, is the scale of our use of technology. It's become almost something that from cradle to grave, we are reliant on. And I previously shared some statistics about just technology's general use among US adults, but kind of focusing more on utilization for health reasons. Surveys show that nearly 70% of adults in the United States first go online if they have a medical issue or question. They don't ring up their healthcare provider or someone who's knowledgeable. They actually search the web. Over 60% have used a health-related app in the past 12 months. And the vast majority of healthcare providers and hospitals now utilize electronic health record systems. And, perhaps again, these are not surprising statistics given that more people have a smartphone than a primary care doctor. But the implications here are enormous. The penetration of technology, into our lives is so great, and the potential is so great. And that's part of the reason why we are here today at this forum. Can health technology make us healthier? Can it fill the unmet needs and the gaps that are, driving health disparities and inequities and costing us hundreds of billions of dollars every year, if not more? Can technology save us? Well, NIH recognizes the potential of technology in the healthcare ecosystem. And so, every year we release many, many, many funding opportunity announcements related to healthcare. We want people to come up with great innovative ideas. And this includes the intersection of technology and health. And so these are just a few examples. There are many others, a few examples of some recent funding opportunities that NIH, but also AHRQ have released, where there is a desire to see how technology can help leverage and improve health, but also with a mindfulness about how to responsibly use health technology. So these are things that we are very interested in. And what's the problem with that? I mean, why am I up here telling you to navigate it wisely? And why am I not just telling you to jump in the deep end with both feet? Technology is something that, has such a broad penetration, so much use. I mean, it has so much potential. Why not just go for it? Isn't it going to save us? And the answer is, I do not think it's going to save us, but I do think it has the potential, great potential, to help us if we design it and use it mindfully and thoughtfully and through a lens of health equity. And with that, I'd like to just show you this very brief video. Tech, if you can help me with this to play it.
Hi, Mama. Joyce. I am 38 years old. This is Matthew, he's 7. Antonio, he's 14. Selena, come around. Selena, she's 4. And my 16-year-old Molly.
I'm filming.
She has epilepsy. I was extremely frustrated about her meds because her meds were not working anymore. I had looked up this company on Facebook. I had just looked up epilepsy and I found this company. It popped up.
This is what is in my head.
And it stops her seizures.
I just keep it over here until you like find the exact place where the RNS is and the data to
come
doctors. Yeah. I was like, can they read my every single thought?
Hello, my name is Rosario and I live in Southern California. My middle daughter is the one that suffered the most with mental issues. She was bullied when in her first year of high school. She was bullied in person, and then she was also bullied online. I did go into my insurance website and I did go through find a provider. I was able to find mental health care for my daughter.
I'm 23 years old and I live in Shreveport, Louisiana. Okay, I guess this is the one technically. Let's see what it's giving. Personally, I don't have one, so I can't sign in, but this is definitely what it looks like. I had no idea that this was available. For me, it's easier to call and write stuff down as I'm talking.
Like, I don't really trust any website or healthcare provider to be able to keep my data private, even if that's what they really honestly want to do, just because like I don't think that they really understand how to do that, especially like with computers.
For me and my generation, we're very tech savvy and we prefer convenience. I feel like my parents like searching websites, they don't really know how to do that. They don't know how to go on a healthcare portal. And honestly, like if they didn't have it, they would probably just go like in person, which is really annoying.
¿Has tenido citas con los doctores virtual?
Tuve una vez con mi hija, ella me ayudó, pero después yo no supe cómo prender, qué botones pichar o algo para poder hablar con ellos. Traté 2 veces y no pude en la computadora. Entonces lo llamé por teléfono, aprender a manejar o que sea más fácil para poderme comunicar con ellos y poderlos ver.
Tus amigos, compañeros de la escuela que
social
son o
media
fueron así.
Kind of continued the bullying for my daughter, but it also technology, internet helped her be able to receive treatment online when COVID hit.
Here's Matthew. He's 7. He'll be 8 next month. But he is allergic to peanuts, tree nuts, milk, eggs, wheat, gluten, soy, beef, sunflower seed, and oats. So I use a lot of apps to look up things that he can and can't have. But this is my main group that I look at, our Food Allergy Mom. If you need the answers to certain things when it comes to health, you're gonna have to put out some of your information in some privacy. You don't have to put like your exact things, but you do have to put out some things.
Thank you, Tech. So I love this video because it touches on so many important points. You know, so some of the things that I heard and saw, and you probably have your own takeaways, are technology helped with access to providers, to useful information. It actually delivered therapeutics for that young woman. It was convenient. But then what I also heard some other people say is that technology was not something that was very convenient for them. The elderly woman who speaks Spanish, you know, was really struggling to use the electronic health record system in the portal, and she couldn't do it without the assistance of family members. And, you know, that makes it very unlikely that her data is going to be represented, you know, fully in that electronic health record system. Someone else mentioned, you know, concerns about privacy. And all of these viewpoints are valid. And they're all valid because technology is a tool. It's not inherently good or bad. It's not inherently beneficial or harmful. Those are values and qualities that depend on our intention, our use, the community that uses it. And so it really is upon us to be mindful and consider all of these factors as we design our health technologies so that we can maximize the benefits and minimize the harms. And so what I have here on the scale is just, a visual showing some of the benefits and some of the harms, that we already see happening with health technology. So the convenience, the access to information and to providers, but then also the digital divide, which was mentioned a couple of times before with the elderly Spanish-speaking woman. And the digital divide is that gap between those who can easily use and access technology and those who cannot. So there is also great potential to widen that digital divide as we embrace health technology more, but do not take into account that some people may not easily be able to use it. So how can we maximize the benefits and minimize the harms? As a major funder of biomedical research, NIH thinks a lot about what makes for good science, what makes for good health innovation. And there are a lot of different criteria that we use in our review processes, but some of the most important, three of the most important are scientific rigor, generalizability, and health equity. So scientific rigor is defined by the NIH as the strict application of scientific method to ensure unbiased experimental design, methodology, analysis, interpretation, and reporting of results. It promotes scientific integrity and reproducibility, and this reproducibility is essential to validate a clinical therapeutic or an intervention. Generalizability refers to the ability of an intervention to be useful beyond your controlled research setting. That is, when it's utilized in the general population, when it goes live. It must be demonstrated by research. It cannot be assumed. You cannot just say, hey, I'm pretty sure this is going to work for you in your community. Just take it on faith. No, it doesn't work like that. You need to have the data. And that means that studies that are very homogeneous in terms of the participant characteristics or the people that they use to kind of base the development of that technology are going to have limited generalizability. And then finally, health equity. Health equity is the principle underlying the process of ensuring that all individuals and populations have optimal opportunities to attain the best health possible. It acknowledges that we don't all start our health journeys from the same place, even though we may share a common goal. And NIH prioritizes health equity because it's the only way that we are going to reduce and eliminate devastating and super costly inequities and health disparities. So I want to talk a little bit about health equity, just because it's going to come up multiple times over the next couple of days, and there can be some confusion about health inequity and health equity and health disparities. What do these terms mean? So with health equity, as mentioned, it's the recognition that although we don't all start from the same place, we may share a common health goal. And so this graphic, I tried to come up with, an interesting graphic, and I pilfered this from online. But in this graphic, the health goal that is commonly shared is breast cancer screening on a routine basis. And you can see there are people in 3 different, boats and versions of flotation devices. The person in the yacht, maybe it's a lot easier for them to just hop ashore and meet that goal. Maybe all they need is their primary care provider's referral. But if you're in the sailboat or in the rowboat, you face so many other challenges that may prevent you from reaching that goal on a regular basis. And that may then result in you having poor outcomes over time, potentially even fatal outcomes. So health equity is the recognition that we don't all start in the same place, but we need to figure out ways, whether it's special considerations or outreach or, transportation support to help people reach their goals. So my question for you, as users of health technology, as designers of health technology, as people who are coming up with interventions that really could benefit people is your intervention or your technology going to lift all boats, or is it going to just lift some? And, we would like you at NIH, we would like, and I think many of us would agree that it's ideal to try to lift all boats. And so that means that you have to be mindful to design your intervention and your technology in a way that it does not exclude large groups of people, that it is not inaccessible, or that if they can access it, it doesn't work for them because it wasn't really designed for them. That is health equity. All right. The other reason why I think that it's important to kind of have a lens of health equity is when you look at the data, the populations and communities that have the least access to technology are also far and wide the communities that experience the greatest disparities in health. And so we're talking about older people, we're talking about people of lower income and lower educational attainment, potentially people from certain racial and ethnic groups, but also people in rural communities and people with disabilities. We cannot leave them behind. And so as you design your interventions and your technology, be mindful of the fact that that lens of health equity will also potentially make or break our fight against health disparities. So I've thrown a lot at you, terms and definitions and statistics and health equity and rigor. So now's the part about how do you take all of those things into consideration? How can you navigate this to maximize the benefits and minimize the harms for the people that you are working with and hopefully, trying to serve? The first kind of tip that I'd like to give sounds commonsensical, and it's basically know your disease of interest or know before you go. But I can tell you at NIH, it is very common for us to get applications where it becomes very clear that the people proposing the study or the innovation do not fully understand the health condition or the disease that they are interested in. And so I say, know before you go, really do a deep dive into the health condition that you are trying to leverage technology to help. And that means think outside of just the biological cause and effect box, because there's so many other moderators and things that affect people's health, whether it's policies and geography and income and education. All of these things will not just impact their health, but their ability to use and benefit from your health technology or your intervention, okay? So really important to understand what that disease means for your specific population. And then the second tip of advice, collaborate early and often with the community. And we're going to have speakers in the next couple of days who, will talk more about this. But, for decades, the philosophy in healthcare and also in biomedical research has been very top down. It's been, we'll make it and people will come because we're the experts. We'll create something and of course people will use it because, we know more than they do. Well, that's not true. And it's very paternalistic and it's also very dangerous. And it can lead to really poor study and clinical and commercial outcomes. And, many patients and consumers are also very unhappy with this approach. If you are including them in clinical trials and you're using their experiences and their data to create something, they would like to be more at the table. And that is, I think, appropriate. And there are some populations that have historically been exploited and underrepresented in research. And so, especially with populations that are like that, it is really important to communicate early and often with them and to ask these critical questions. What is important to them? What are they willing to do? What are they not willing to do? What can they afford? You know, where can they be recruited on a reliable basis? You know, so that communication with community members as you're developing your health technology is critical. And it also will impact your credibility. So let's talk about data. I was going to title this slide, it's the data stupid, but no one here is stupid, and I'm not trying to offend anyone. But the point I was trying to make is that it all hinges on your data. You know, the data that you use to create your product, to shape your intervention, but also the data that you generate. You know, it needs to be good quality. So please keep in mind again that, sources of data are not all created equal. There's a lot of low quality, poor quality data that has been published in very good journals, okay? So you have to do your due diligence to figure out where the good quality data is. And if it's not there, you have to generate it yourself. Resist the temptation, just don't do poor quality data. And again, be mindful of where is that data coming from? How is it collected? Who is it collected from, especially with health technology? You know, we are seeing so much bias now being revealed in algorithms and in AI models, and a lot of that is because the data that was used to create those models was not as inclusive as it should have been. So it's important to understand where the data that you're using is coming from. And then the data that you generate is equally important. There's a lot to consider here as well. Who are you including and who are you excluding and why? Convenience is never a good reason to include or exclude people. You know, there needs to be a scientific justification, especially with health technology where there's going to be such broad penetration of that product potentially into society and use. It's really important to understand, your reasons, scientific reasons for including and excluding people. And then we're going to talk a little bit about models and algorithms in a second, but how you're analyzing your data is also extremely important. So let's talk about AI. AI is the it girl right now, no pun intended, the IT it girl. It's great. Everyone loves it. It's going to save us, right? IT is great, but it's not perfect. IT is not perfect because it is created by us, by humans. It is designed by people, developers in a room who, determine based on their own priorities and perspectives what is important to put into an algorithm that fuels that AI. And so we need to recognize that there's almost always going to be some bias or some perspective that is revealed in AI. And it's important for us as practitioners or as researchers or potentially as, software and hardware engineers to be transparent about what AI is doing and what it is not doing and where it is coming from and how it has been developed and designed. Do I think that we need to stop using AI? Absolutely not. But, there are more and more examples, every year of biases that are being recognized in algorithms and AI. And these are impacting our electronic health record systems. They're impacting our technologies that we're using and wearing and collecting data from every day. So it's very important to recognize that AI has great potential, but is not perfect. So what can we do about that? This is just one example of some guidelines. There are multiple guidelines out there that are trying to help people better navigate the use of AI in their clinical practice and in their research practice. This one comes from the Stanford Biomedical Informatics Group. But as mentioned, there are a lot of other ones out there that are equally useful. I put this one up as an example because, it's short and to the point. But what I think you can appreciate here is that it is providing guidance about how to approach AI, and be critical and select AI in a way that benefits you and your patient populations, or your research populations. And whenever possible, of course, validating AI, and algorithms would be ideal. Okay, last few slides, inclusivity. So greater inclusivity, I'm encouraging you to do this as a way to kind of navigate your use of technology. Inclusivity almost always results in a better clinical outcome, in a better study outcome, and in better commercial outcomes. And I don't just mean inclusivity of participants, but I especially mean inclusivity of the team of people who are doing the research and developing and designing the product. When you have different perspectives and life experiences and backgrounds at the table, it just leads to better innovation, more innovation. And at Apple, they have a motto, think different, but it's really hard to think different if you are working in an echo chamber where everyone is just kind of saying the same thing and has the same lived experience and the same perspective. You can't think outside of the box if you don't even recognize you're in a box, right? So having an inclusive group of researchers, a diverse group of researchers will benefit you. And this includes my last bullet, which is having the skeptics. And I know everyone's like, oh no, the skeptics. And I don't mean haters, people who are always going to be like, no, that sucks, that sucks, that sucks. And they don't give any constructive feedback. I mean, the skeptics are like, well, have you thought about this? Or I don't know about that, or this might not work for this group. You need those people on your team while you're developing your technology and your intervention, because they're going to point out really important weaknesses and flaws and oversights before you go live, before you launch your product. Because if you release your product with those weaknesses, it's going to get torn apart. Okay, so embrace the skeptics, have a diverse group of people on your team, and you will have better commercial success and research and scientific success. Now, inclusivity among study participants, I think that's kind of a no-brainer, and I don't want to dwell too much on this. It enhances generalizability, equity, it reduces the risk of bias. And these are a couple of examples where, technology was designed using participants in groups that were not optimally inclusive, and the results were not ideal. So pulse oximeter, and then also a wearable function. And, we could have probably predicted this. Hindsight is 2020, but I don't want to judge. It's easy sometimes to get caught up in an idea and then really want to manifest it quickly. And so you just kind of grab for the low-hanging fruit. But I'm encouraging you, as we navigate technology for health with the lens of health equity, to not do that, because the results can be quite harmful, and especially considering the penetration of technology in healthcare now. When you have something that is not accurate for broad swaths of people, the implications can become quite large. Okay. Last two slides. So I'm not going to even read this very much, but, avoid making assumptions about your participants or the people using your products. I shouldn't call them participants because, many of you are not researchers and you could be clinicians. But also avoid making assumptions about the technology that you're using, especially if it's been on the market for a while. Just because it's been on the market for a while doesn't mean that it's great, okay? It could have been on the market for a while just because there was no alternative when it first came out. So it's really important to make sure that before you develop your own intervention, do your own study, or use a technology in your clinical practice, that you understand who you're doing it for, who you're doing it with, and what you're doing it with. Review, revise, repeat. This should be your mantra. You know, technology is constantly changing because demographics and science and policies are always changing. You know, there's always going to be a need to review and refine and revise, and that's not a bad thing. But if you don't do that and the times around you are still changing, your technology is not going to become, it's going to become irrelevant very quickly, or it may just be harmful. Okay. So review, revise, repeat, and ask yourself every time you do a revision from 2.0 to 3.0, who did you leave behind? You know, and how can you change that? Are you narrowing or widening the digital divide through that revision? Try to, again, keep that health equity lens and have maximal benefit and minimize the harm. And if you're using technology that someone else has created, again, you know, make sure that you do your due diligence and make sure that it's actually serving you and serving your population. My parting thoughts: health technology is here to stay, and it has so much potential. It feels like a fast moving train, and it may seem like you don't have a lot of scientific agency, but you do. You know, you have the ability to steer how you use it and potentially how it's developed. So don't give up that scientific agency. We are among the privileged folks who have the ability to help guide and design how many people will have their journeys using health technology. And so they're counting on us to do right by them, and to not forget them, those of them, you know, that are routinely overlooked. Technology is a mirror that reflects our assumptions, and that's not something you should be ashamed of. You know, be proud of the perspectives that you have and the place that you come from, but recognize when it is being inserted in the technology that you're creating and how that might impact people who don't share that perspective and those assumptions. Maximize benefit, minimizing harm. It's great. It takes more time though, and more thought. And you know, that is time well spent. So I encourage you, you know, to be mindful and to take that time, because it will lead to better scientific and commercial success. And then finally, don't go it alone. Partner with good people from a lot of different backgrounds, partner with the community, and consider partnering with us at NIH. We'd love to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sekai, for setting the stage for the for this conversation. So what I'm going to, next up is we're going to have a series of short talks. I'm going to just briefly introduce each of our three speakers, and they're going to go one right after another, and then we'll have our panel discussion with all four of them together. Dr. Paula Gardiner will be first, and she'll be she is the Director of Primary Care Implementation Research at the Center for Mindfulness and Compassion at Cambridge Health Alliance, and is Associate Professor of Family Medicine and Community Health at UMass Medical Center. This will be followed by Dr. Abby Batchelder, who is the Associate Vice Chair of Psychology in the Department of Psychiatry at Boston Medical Center. And she's a clinical health psychologist who's done, and you'll hear about her work as directing a new behavioral health equity program. And certainly last but not least will be Dr. Adam Rodman, who's the general internist and medical educator at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center and assistant professor at Harvard Medical School. So I will first have Paula come up.
Okay, I have no disclosures. Hi everyone. Hi, I'm Paula. Paula Gardiner. I'm a family medicine physician at Cambridge Health Alliance, and my interest in using technology for my patient population, which is a patient population with a wide variety of cultural backgrounds, economic backgrounds, really developed after I did my fellowship. And my colleagues here are Nina Haas and Darshan Yang, and they are from a small company called Bright Outcome. And I put them here because it's the combination of working with a company, and this Bright Outcome is very interested in a mechanism called an SBIR, or it's a small business grant provided by the NIH, and that mechanism has been very helpful in the research that I'm about to show you. And I put their journey as a team because it's really between the working with Bright Outcome and a huge team of people that I've worked with over the years to create the project I'm about to show you. And I put Boston Medical Center because I've been working on this for 10 years now, and the lineage of this started at Boston Medical Center. Now, Boston Medical Center is just a few miles from here. It's the largest safety net hospital in this area, and it serves a Medicaid, Medicare population and a very racially diverse low-income patient population. And in that journey, we were trying to understand how can we bring integrative medicine to our patients from neighborhoods that may not have access to integrative medicine. So we designed something called a integrative group medical visit, which combined a adaptation of mindfulness-based stress reduction with some key principles of integrative medicine in the clinical model of a group medical visit. So the first version of this, Our Whole Lives, a holistic e-health toolkit, was developed in 2014. And we used the funding from PCORI to develop it over a year and a half using a patient advisory group. The patients were recommended from the 3 community health centers that we were doing the clinical trial in addition to patients in the surrounding neighborhoods. So we sat at a table and did rapid cycles of creating beta types or rough drafts of what should this online platform look like, and having the patient advisors say, you know what, that's wrong. And then coming back to the table and trying again, and then giving them another prototype and them saying, okay, that's closer. That's starting to represent me. I can see that in myself. I can see that for my community. And we were very fortunate to have participatory community methods as a way of guiding how can we do rigorous science and change what the patients were telling us to do. The other thing that we did for this first trial was we created a patient advocate, a virtual patient advocate named Gabby. And what was very important about Gabby was that the way she looked, her hair, her skin color, her clothes could be representative of our patient population. And they had our patient advisors had a lot of input into how Gabby's look. And they also, through this, started to develop their own ideas. The patient advisors started to develop their own ideas of what should the content be? What should the functions be? How can we create community? So this is a picture of a community discussion board that was very clear that our patient advisors were telling us, we need a community discussion board. We want to have a way that we can be dialoguing with each other. Oh, thank you. I found some water. Excuse me 1 second. Okay. And I just wanted to share with you these are the demographics of our first clinical trial from Boston Medical Center. So you can see that there are 86% people who identified as female, and we had 19% white, 57% Black, and 24% other, and then 14% Hispanic. So we were really trying to represent the people from Dorchester, Roxbury, and our surrounding neighborhoods. And I think the main finding that we found from this study, which really focused on patients with chronic pain and depression, was that they saw a reduction of emergency room use and an increase in their SF mental health score, or SF-12 score. Okay. So we got our first trial done, and then we're like, okay, well, where is OWL going to fly next? What is the next step for this? And so in 2019, with funding from Aetna, the Aetna Foundation, we were able to do a study of OWL alone. There was no in-person touch. There was no clinical touch. There was no group visit aspect to this. And this had 43 participants. Average age was 50. Again, 91% were female. 37% identified themselves as Black, 16% Hispanic. And you can see that we're now starting to represent our patient population at Boston Medical Center, where we had 40% who are on sick leave or disability. And this study, what we were able to find, that we did find a reduction of depression, pain interference, and average pain impact score. And also, at this time, you may remember that opioid use disorder was on the forefront of a public health crisis. And so we found a 13% reduction of opioid use, which is really positive. Of course, this is a very small study. The other thing was that we were trying to understand, what is the mechanism? How is it that the online platform is changing behavior? How is the online platform helping this happen? And so we used the Health Education Impact Questionnaire to show that we were having an increased effect size for health-directed behavior and self-technique and acquisition. So from there, we were able to get some additional NIH funding to start to explore how OWL can help with high blood pressure. And this was such an amazing study, where we had the combination of a group medical visit with a teaching kitchen, where we're actually teaching people in real time different recipes and how to cook the DASH diet, in addition to having OWL as an online platform. And here the patient advisors were changing the login. They were, again, interacting with curriculum. They decided that they wanted to have a measurement record. So everybody got a blood pressure and they took home. They checked their blood pressure at home. They put it on the platform. And we were able to track their blood pressure. We were having current weekly curriculum. You can see there was a lot of patient education aspect. They wanted to have video and on print curriculum. There's the video. And then they also really enjoyed audio learning, such as body scans, chair yoga. Now, one of the things I've been curious about is this idea of gamification, which is when you give people rewards, are they more likely to interact with your interface? Are they more likely to change behavior? So we added additional gamification. And again, we maintained the community board. We also added a journal, because self-reflection was an amazing part of people's transformation, and they wanted a place to write down what they were experiencing. And we also expanded what's called a resource page, or a resource library. And these were resources that our patients told us they wanted. So there's recipes, there's grocery shopping, but they also wanted information on housing. They wanted information on intimate partner violence. They wanted where can I go to my local food pantry? They wanted information on lots of variety of things. So we created a big resource page for them. Okay, now where we are right now is in our studies, we've now moved to Gemini, which is now the group integrative mindfulness over the internet platform. And OWL's now on version 4, which is Gemini. And my colleague Rebecca Wells is using it for a study with migraines. And so we've had to adapt the platform for people who have migraine. And so that also affects color, shading, the amount of text, and we've had to do testing on people with migraines. And then we're also doing our version 4, which is an SBIR now, randomized controlled trial we're doing for OWL for chronic pain. And in my final comments to you are having patients as partners in your development and in running your clinical trials is key. Do a lot of small focused pilots. Also prepare to let go of what you think is the right way. It's not the right way. The patients know the right way. And always creating your advisory group is really key. And then you also, key consideration is assessing our participants' technology savviness. Literacy matters, technology literacy matters. So, and there we go. So here's my summary: engage participants in development, be prepared to pivot, and the technology is always evolving. So that means we have to as well.
I'm Abby Batchelder, as was mentioned before, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the use of technology to assess negative self-conscious emotions. Can I pull this up here? I think that, oh, this is me. I can just, so I can't see it here. Oh, it's right there. Okay, lovely. Thank you. I think realistically, this should be entitled Steps Toward Technology to Assess Nonverbal Emotion. But I am going to tell you kind of about our journey to move to in that direction. Help me out here. Just the one. Okay, great. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to first contextualize myself, kind of share who I am, because this space is actually not my primary area. I'm what I would consider a public health psychologist. So I'm a psychologist with a background in public health that's very focused on getting collaboratively working with communities to adapt and then implement evidence-based behavioral health interventions to people who have traditionally been underserved. And most of my work is with people with and vulnerable to HIV and active substance use disorders. And through that work, I'm a mixed methods community-based researcher. I heard a very consistent narrative over and over and over again, so much so that it actually affected my research career and my trajectory, which was when people told me that when they felt less valuable, when they felt less than, or they internalized the stigma that was conveyed to them in society, they were less likely to engage in healthcare. And when they felt better about themselves, when they felt deserving, they were more likely to use less, because I was working a lot with people who use drugs, and go to appointments more. They felt more compelled to go to healthcare. And I found this in the Bronx, I found this in San Francisco, I found this in Boston, I found this in people recently diagnosed with HIV, and even outside of HIV, people with hepatitis C. And throughout that, I found a narrative that was then similarly echoed in the literature. So in the past 5 to 7, 10 years, maybe, internalized stigma has really been identified as a critical barrier to engagement in self-care behaviors in HIV and other illnesses. And what I would consider the affective or emotional correlate of internalized stigma, self-conscious emotions, really painful emotions like shame and embarrassment, the kind of thing that makes us want to stay in bed and pull the covers up over our heads, is something that might be a barrier to engagement in self-care too. So I've found that, and others have found that, and I think honestly that's been found in the qualitative literature for many decades. Shame in particular is known to elicit 2 types of behaviors. So the affective science literature, really pioneered by Jess Tracy at the University of British Columbia, has identified both an avoidance pattern, which is what I was hearing about in my work, as well as some evidence indicating a desire to change the self. And a lot of this research has happened in substance use and HIV spaces, as well as some other spaces, but it really identified itself to me as a potential point of leverage, a point of intervention, to improve the lives of many individuals. So this is kind of my general working conceptual model. I tend to work with many people with what we might consider multiple stigmatized identities or behaviors or experiences. And for some, not everybody, but a lot of folks walking through my doors in like a mental health context in an infectious disease or substance use clinic, that was also experienced as these behaviorally influential negative self-conscious emotions. So most of my career has actually been devoted to mitigating that pathway. So I'm primarily an interventionist, and over the years, I've come up with various interventions to mitigate this using mindfulness strategies, self-compassion, and behavioral medicine. So for example, I've had a trajectory to create the MATTER intervention, which we're now testing in a multi-site randomized control trial. But during this process, during this trajectory, I've realized that we're actually quite crummy at measuring negative self-conscious emotion. We're not great at it. And what we usually do is we ask people, how much shame are you feeling right now? Or how frequently do you feel shame? And that requires a lot of the person. It requires them to be aware of their emotions, to be willing to disclose the emotion, which might feel embarrassing or shameful, and to be able to accurately distinguish between emotions. So that might mean that we are under-identifying those who might benefit from this type of emotion. So there's some really interesting work that came out over 10 years ago, I would say, by Jess Tracy, again, indicating some nonverbal movements that may be indicative of shame in particular. Head down, shoulders hunched, chest caved are the three that were really identified. And there's some differences in reporting on that, but there have also been some autonomic stress response correlates identified by Margaret Kemeny at UCSF and others. And this kind of lends itself to a call in the affective science literature for multimodal measurement of emotion. So as part of a K23 a while ago, I thought, okay, let's try this. I got data from 2 R01s from Judy Moskowitz, who generously shared it with me. And I looked at, she had videos of people describing their HIV diagnosis narrative within 3 months of diagnosis. So we pooled this data and we looked at the videos. They were recorded. We transcribed the videos. So we looked at the language that was used. And then we looked at the self-reported emotions concurrently, thinking that we would find a latent higher order measure, variable, if you will, factor of negative self-conscious emotion or shame. That didn't really happen. What we found, this is just the correlation matrix from that work, but you can see that the self-reported negative self-conscious emotion hangs together. Some of the movement, nonverbal measurements hang together. And I don't know if you can read, but there are a couple of blue that indicate across domains, across modalities, there's some relationships, but not really what I was hoping for. So we couldn't really do that analysis. And we did a CFA, and I'm not going to go into too much detail for time, but we saw we could create latent factors of the self-reported negative self-conscious emotion and the movement, nonverbal, but the latent order didn't converge, which was really interesting to me and potentially indicates that the 3 modalities are different. They may be different, measuring different things, but there's some real issues. The videos weren't recorded for this purpose. This was a secondary goal that Judy was kind to share her data with me. The narratives weren't designed to elicit emotion, and there was some missing data. So I wrote an Osher pilot award with some folks in this room, and some of whom you'll be hearing from later, to really see, okay, could we try to produce a methodology that could do this better? That could do this very intentionally, knowing that we weren't going to be able to really find what we were looking for, but we could see if we could come up with a way to find what we wanted to find in hopes of better serving this patient, the people that I was interested in serving, but also possibly other people as well. So we had kind of modest, I think, realistic goals. We wanted to develop a protocol for collecting and testing and analyzing. We went for 6 modalities, measurements. And then we wanted to assess the feasibility of not only looking at shame in particular, which is what I'm particularly interested in from an intervention perspective, but also could we differentiate it from 2 other emotions with some notable characteristics, frustration and pride? And then could we see if we could use some novel approaches like machine learning to probably not get what we were looking for, but see if that's a possible strategy. So we did that. These are our 6 modalities, and I have a lot of information on each of these. I'm not going to go into them because of the duration of this talk, but we looked at the postural movement with Paula Bonanno's team, who's a movement engineer. So it was very sophisticated. They have the capacity to really look at movement and joints and such. We looked at facial movement with Dr. Molly Rubin's guidance and expertise. We did look at autonomic stress response. We looked at galvanic skin response, vocal characteristics, narrative content, and then self-reported emotion. So we did the self-report using the POMS. So kind of the way most affective scientists might do it in real time. How much do you feel? How much of X do you feel at this moment? So this is what the study looked like. We had a washout task. We then had narrative prompts to elicit the 3 emotions that we were interested in, which were counterbalanced for order. So again, shame, frustration, pride. We ended everyone with joy because we didn't want to send anyone back into the world feeling ashamed. And we followed sort of the affective science literature. We really went into the literature. We had a great team. Judy Moskowitz is a social scientist, as is Molly, who joined our team a little bit later, but we really tried to make this as good as possible. And we, you can see in those images back there, we were measuring all of those things at the same time. So we created these prompts, again, based on the literature, asking folks, tell me about a recent experience that made you feel bad about yourself, frustrated or annoyed, good about yourself, or an accomplishment. And then the joy was, again, where we ended everyone. And we got 30 people. So again, these are steps in the direction of measuring negative self-conscious emotion using multimodal strategies, including technology. And everyone in this sample was living with HIV. So I mentioned that's who I aim to serve. That's why I'm interested in this work. Thinking about people with illnesses that really are stigmatizing, that come into an office, often experiencing negative self-conscious emotion, possibly in response to a provider's interactions with them. So that's who we got. I wanted to see, is this possible? And one of my biggest questions was, is it feasible? With so much medical mistrust and research mistrust, would people be okay with talking about themselves with 3 to 4 cameras on them, sitting in a very specific position with a lot around them? So it was actually it was deemed much more acceptable than I would have hypothesized. I was really worried about this. Like, could we really do this? Would people living with one of the most stigmatized illnesses in our society right now, I would argue, many of whom had other comorbidities, find it acceptable to sit in this room being asked these questions with video cameras and such? And they were. You can see the mean on a scale of 0 to 10 was 9.6. And most people gave it a 10. So I will give the caveat that we can't really glean that much from this data. It's an N of 30. But one thing we did find was that the prompts themselves did not elicit an elevated self-reported level of emotion to the intended emotion. So you can see highlighted in the mean scores highlighted in red, which indicates that from a machine learning perspective, if we were to move forward with this, that might not be the ground truth we're looking for. And we did figure that out. We did find some differences across our measurements between types of emotion, which was one of our secondary exploratory goals. For example, we see some differences in the facial movements associated with different emotions between the prompts. But this is just kind of a taste. And we've actually done a lot of additional exploratory analyses. Someone did their doctoral dissertation on this work. And while we weren't actually able to look at just the 3 emotions, that person added joy, just to see if we could use these strategies, and we could. So bottom line, we did demonstrate feasibility and acceptability of this multimodal measurement strategy, but an insufficient sample to identify specific patterns or whether multimodal measurement is an accurate or a meaningful way to move forward. And clearly additional work is needed in this space. We are considering what to do next, whether we want to go for a bigger data collection. We do believe that would be feasible and acceptable. And from my perspective, doing this is meaningful because there are dynamics in a medical setting where people feel negative self-conscious emotion, often in response to a provider dynamic. And if we were able to train providers to identify that, they could course correct more easily. So this is something that I'm invested in. We are thinking about what we can do next. With this data, I feel like we have a good pilot data for a next step, but we don't know how to use it quite yet. We need more information to think about better and more effectively measuring negative self-conscious emotion. But I would argue it is a really important thing to try to continue doing.
I'm Adam. I want to talk about a near future situation. So everyone imagine it's the year, say 2030, and we have patients coming into the emergency room with chest pain. someone has had severe chest pain, and we now have advanced triage algorithms that are going to decide, is this person at high risk enough from their chest pain to give them a coronary catheterization? That is they put a catheter usually through your groin, maybe the wrist, doesn't matter, but go to your heart, see if there's a blockage and open it up. And I want you to consider this situation. This AI system, year 2030, will make all of these decisions independently. And when it is studied, we will find that a white man compared to a black woman, the black woman will get the appropriate coronary catheterization only 40% of the times that the white man would. A huge amount of racial bias from this AI algorithm. That, to me, is not at all acceptable. I think all of us can agree that is not a world that we want to live in. Now, the problem, for those of you who may have read this study before, is that I'm not talking about an AI algorithm. I'm talking about a study from 1999 that looked at cardiologists in the emergency room that found this exact same thing, which is that a cardiologist, these are videos, they watched videos, there were many different conditions here, but when you looked at the patient that they treated, quote, the most appropriately according to guidelines at the time, it was the white man. The patient that was least appropriately treated was the black woman. And the difference was a 60% difference in the appropriate management. 1999, this is humans. So why am I talking about artificial intelligence here? So I am certain that you have read in the news that artificial intelligence algorithms encode the racial biases of humans. Now, this happens from two reasons. I'm going to talk about this one first because there's a lot of confusion in this field when we talk about the bias in language models, which are trained on our text and audio, and the bias in machine learning algorithms. So I want to be explicitly clear, I'm not talking about machine learning algorithms. This is or prediction algorithm. This is a fantastic study from Ziad Obermeyer from a machine learning algorithm that was optimized to identify the patients at highest risk with comorbidities, medical comorbidities, so that health systems could spend more money on them to try to get them into the health system. They optimize for cost. I think everybody knows, well, maybe you don't, but in the literature, this is a very, very common study. 50% of Black patients were just cut out of this. Why? Because Black patients societally have less access to healthcare. So historic spending has been less, even though as a population, there are plenty of medical comorbidities. So this is an example of how a machine learning prediction algorithm being used for the right reasons can easily go off target. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm actually talking about this new generation powered by transformers. We don't need to go into the details, but that encode human training data, whether that's images, whether that's text, to help make decisions. So this is a famous example from Stable Diffusion. Stable Diffusion is one of these, well, it's a diffusion model that can create images. AI images are everywhere, including in my presentation. And that if you ask it to create attractive people, as you can see, it creates white people, poor people. Well, you can just look at this and see what biases are encoded in the training set of Stable Diffusion. Again, not because the creators sat down to try to make a racist algorithm, but because they were encoding human biases and how these images are labeled. And now this is also true for language models. This is a study published by some of my colleagues at Stanford that shows that a lot of these same biases, some of them incredibly egregious, are encoded in large language models. This is a study that I published recently because one of the questions always is, well, how does this affect patient care? So this is a human comparison study looking at pain scores for patients. And in particular, a white male patient and a Black female patient had the biggest difference. And the AI algorithm biased actually just as much as the humans in rating Black patients' pain less seriously. So giving a higher score to the white patient's pain and a lower score to the Black patient's pain. And this was done in humans and 2 different large language models. Okay, these, right now, your reaction should probably be, this is horrible, Adam. Why would we be talking about using these algorithms at all? There's a lot of talk. I mean, right now, some of your health systems, an AI is listening to every interaction you have with your doctor and generating the note. The first draft of a lot of patient portal messages are being developed by AI. There are researchers myself included, this is why I get a lot of hate mail, but researchers like myself who are looking at ways that we can augment clinical reasoning. But why would we do this given these stats? So some of the sobering information is that I'm a doctor. Some of the people here are doctors. I don't want to say we're not good at our jobs, but the problem is that we're human. Doctors make a lot of errors. This is from David Newman-Toker from earlier this year. 800,000 Americans die or are severely injured each year because of diagnostic errors. And these are on not super rare diseases. 40% of these are heart attacks, strokes, very common things. And it affects the most vulnerable patients. This is a wonderful study from Andy Auerbach and colleagues, my colleagues as well, showing that when a patient gets sick in the ICU, about 25% of them decompensate because of a diagnostic error. And the most common cause is what happens up here. And then this is why people get really angry at me. Just to situate everybody here, purple management tasks on the right, diagnostic tasks on the left. These are benchmarks. They're all human adjudicated, so done by humans. They are the highest level of benchmarks we have. Purple is humans. The green, well, is that aquamarine? Aquamarine is humans using an AI. The green is AI on its own. This is GPT-4 Turbo. And see that tiny little red bar up in the side? That is the new model, the runtime chain of thought model. 01 is what OpenAI calls it. But they're already better than humans. I mean, what this really is benchmark saturation. But we have entered an era where for many tasks, we're dealing with at least superhuman performance on benchmarks. And I will tell you from my research, we're approaching superhuman performance with actual patients. I'm running clinical trials. Why does that concern me and why should that concern all of you? Well, as I have mentioned, there is a lot of racial bias that is built into these models. There are computational ways of reducing that. But at a more profound level, this graph on the right is something I'm also an AE at Nijam AI. We just published just this piece. All of these biases that humans have, these cognitive biases, the AI model has as well. Think about the implications of this. Like, what I am deeply concerned is that if you have a biased human and you have a biased AI model that in general outperforms us, well, they have anchoring bias just like we do. Is it just going to make the human more confident in their racist decision? So this is why people get angry at me. We're in a situation where we have superhuman in certain domains, artificial intelligence, likely already, even if we don't, 2 to 3 years, these technologies scale. Not to offend everybody here, but just like self-driving cars, no one's going to trust a human to drive anymore eventually. The same thing is going to happen to medicine. This is why people are angry at me. But what does it mean that we've encoded all of these biases from our language into these algorithms, even if they outperform us on average? I do want to leave, so this is why people get angry at me. I'm going to leave with a little bit of optimism because one of my colleagues, Ethan Go, brilliant researcher, this is about to be published in Nature Communications, recreated that original 1999 study with new videos and showed it, the same methodology, to cardiologists. And as you can see, well, this is the bad news. Cardiologists are still racist, though less so. It's now a 20% difference instead of a 40% difference. But randomized groups, half of them, after they saw the video, but before they made the decision, they were allowed to consult with a large language model. And those that consulted with a large language model, the difference disappeared. They made a more appropriate choice in both populations with no racial difference. And this was GPT-4 Turbo. So this is a language model in which there's no question it has a lot of racial bias and racism encoded into it. So the piece of hope, I don't know that this is hope, but that I want to leave you with is that it's complicated when AI works alone, when AI works with humans, when humans work with humans, but it also may be that some of these algorithms may serve as a cue to make us less biased. I don't know that this is generalizable, but I wanted to leave everybody with something hopeful instead of dropping this bomb and walking off the table. So thank you guys very much for having me.
All right, what an amazing set of talks. I'm going to invite all of our speakers to come up here and have a seat. And while they're doing that, please, again, we're also curating the questions on the HOVA app as well. And so you can certainly use that. But to get so we're gonna all right. So I'm gonna first address a question to all four of you, and then if you can just again for everyone in order to have a maximum and then we also have mics here. Please, if you have a question and you want to come up to the mic, please come up to the mic as well. So what I'm gonna first start off just to is that when we think about as it relates to integrative health, and I want to sort of focus the conversation on integrative health for a moment. How do you think the technology can be leveraged to promote principles of integrated health while addressing healthcare disparities? Again, taking a broader view first, and then we're going to go into more detail for each of us. But if you can kind of give a 15 or 30-second response to that. So, and they're mics, so I think they're all live. Go ahead, Paula.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the complexity around technology is who's it being developed by, who's it being developed for? Is it being developed for profit? Is it being developed for nonprofit? What is the intention of the technology? So I feel like it's a very complicated question, and that's why I appreciate so much for your conference today. You're going to have a discussion on ethics. So I do think that the technology can help reduce health disparities, absolutely, and increase equity. But it needs to be developed in a way where it is letting all the boats rise. And we are making sure that we are leveling the playing field between people who have high literacy, low literacy, high tech literacy, low tech literacy, and reach. Broadband, for example, broadband is not accessible everywhere in the United States or worldwide. And although if you look at our patient population, it is true people have cell phones, absolutely. But what my patients have are 3-month cell phone. They have the license for 3 months and then they're on to the next cell phone. And so the consistency of that and also the data plans, we, in our studies, we provide cell phones and we also provide data plans, because if your technology requires a lot of data and you cannot afford that, then that can be a barrier. So I think all of these things.
Thank you, Abby.
Yeah, I want to echo some of that and expand a little bit. So unrelated to what I presented here, but my intervention work, we go through great lengths to be as flexible as humanly possible in delivering adapted and co-designed behavioral health interventions, often which involve integrated medicine strategies. And technology really facilitates a much broader reach, I would say. So we deliver therapy sessions basically over phones that we also provide. We augment plans. We do that as well. But we also, because of technology, are able to facilitate a virtual session, even if it's not in someone's home. If they don't have a home to do a session with us, we facilitate going to a local community-based organization, and then you can Zoom in and meet with us, or do it over the phone that we provide, or Zoom. So it really does expand access, I think, to something like behavioral health care, which can have real barriers for access for integrated medicine strategies and others.
Yeah, I would agree with what both Paula and Abigail said. The flexibility, the versatility of technology, and not thinking just, of technology as an app or a Zoom or a wearable, because, those are things that are not accessible to many people. Zoom takes up a lot of battery and bandwidth, and apps, may require that you then have an account and there may be a price point, wearables, the same thing. And sometimes they're just, not also not accessible, but also not acceptable to certain populations. And so I think when we're talking about complementary and integrative interventions, we need to try to avoid some of the mistakes that conventional medicine has made in assuming that, the whole make it and they will come approach is really understand what will work for the people that you are interested in and working with and who are experiencing, whatever health disparity or disparities, and figure out what the underlying causes of the disparities are to figure out then what the right platform, the right technological platform will be, to deliver or to capture your complementary and integrative health intervention or work.
Adam.
So something that I am not an integrative health researcher, I'm a cognitive science researcher, but something that I would offer as advice is 20%, 22% of Americans have put their personal health information into ChatGPT. Patient-facing clinical decision support, it won't even be called that. It's coming. The FDA wants a regulatory pathway that allows this. I think the paradigm of patients always talk to doctors first will be over very soon. So my advice, again, not as an integrative health researcher, but as someone who's talking to all of you, would be to think about that, right? What does that look like? What are the values that are encoded in that? How does it work with the in-person integrative practices? How does it interact with the rest of the healthcare? That is coming, especially politically, I think with the new FDA. I mean, the current FDA is planning on that anyway, based on some of my conversations, but this is a future that is coming rapidly. And like if 22% of people do it now, imagine what it's going to be like when there's actually really powerful commercial tools that have randomized controlled trials that show benefits for certain conditions. Like this is going to be here before we know it.
All right. So with that, I'm gonna sort of pivot the question a bit more, thinking about, well, most of you have talked about it from sort of what the provider or the researcher may be needing to have consideration. But if we take certainly I'm going to just pivot to an education perspective, what are the ways in which I think training has to evolve now? So I'm going to take the different perspectives as a researcher, as a clinician, and also then thinking on a larger scale of integrative health. Well, how does training need to evolve to really integrate and think about the interplay of technology, particularly and artificial intelligence and these large language models in the ways in which we either conduct clinical trials or conduct clinical care?
Made a story. I'm at Harvard. I have the role of the task force leader at Harvard Medical School to figure this out. So the official policy is no one knows. I can see. I think there's no question things are about to change dramatically, right? If you want to look at the cognitive purpose of medical school, one of the purposes has been to do this, to train this like gray, lumpy-ish, wettish, my brain or our brains to take good care of our patients. And now we have technologies that are rapidly, at least in certain domains, able to do that. So I think there could be an argument that we completely rethink medical education. And, these are 30-year careers. And the job of the doctor is to be a good communicator, to be integrative. We start selecting different people to medical school who are good at this coordination of care, good communicating. There are other people who might argue, let's go to the other extreme. Let's go back to the ultimate flexnarian. These models are stochastic. Even if they're really good, they're never going to be perfect, right? We're always going to compare them to a human model. So let's train people with the highest amount of scientific rigor so that they can actually know when the machines are wrong. And then everyone's arguing some perspective in between. I am more towards we need to rethink medical education and train good communicators, good integrators. But this is an active debate, and I would be lying if I said that I know, which kind of shows me, the one leading this isn't necessarily a vote of confidence here. So I'm curious what everyone else has to say.
I can give an anecdote that might be helpful. So on Tuesday afternoons, I run a online group medical visit called Living Well with Chronic Pain. And this is a medical group visit, so I bill as a provider, but we do a lot of integrative medicine during our group visits. And I'm very fortunate that the medical students come to observe, to be participant observers. In that process, they are able to see and interact with patients who have chronic pain, who are homebound, and they're able to listen to the stories of these patients and really see where they're living. And there's an aspect of eye-opening of, oh, you know, I see that this patient is not what I typically see in an outpatient 15-minute visit, right? And then during that time, we also say, well, you know, we would like you to lead a patient education. We want you to design something that you will then deliver through the telemedicine to this group of patients that's integrative. And then they have to develop that skill. So I think, I'm hoping that's like a good example of how, really that hands-on training, do one, see one, teach one can be helpful.
Okay, I guess I find myself thinking about how complex people are and how we sometimes get it wrong. You know, thinking about this quest to measure behaviorally influential negative self-conscious emotion, we're not great at it when we think about technology, and people aren't always telling us what seems to be going on with them for lots of reasons. So I'm thinking about something Dr. Chideya said in her talk earlier, that we can't lose the person. I think when we think about advancing technology, we have to think about every individual coming to every medical interaction with their historical, social, the political, their interpersonal context. And some of that is going to mean that someone presents in a really transparent way that may be more useful in an algorithmic decision-making kind of pathway. But someone might be coming to us with a lot of feelings or responses to who we are, to what the system represents, or what the context where we're having that session is occurring, that we might misinterpret, I think, if we're too reductive. So I would say, as we move in this direction, which I fully acknowledge is inevitable in many ways, like, let's not forget the person and the context in which we live, which really does interact with each of us very differently.
I guess my only comment with training of healthcare providers, whether it's doctors, nurse practitioners, chiropractors, acupuncturists, is that I think now in this age of technology delivered healthcare, there needs to be immediate, early, and consistent education throughout training on informatics and critical thinking, and the ability to do a deep dive into the data. So that is not something when I was in medical school in the 1990s, like no one even told us how to look at, a publication or a review paper and kind of dig through the weeds about, sample size and power, but much less inclusivity and, conflicts of interest. Like those were not things that were even on the radar. And granted, I know I'm a dinosaur, that was a long time ago. But maybe they are in the curriculum now. I don't know, but I think they should be. They have to be, because as we've all learned from, our presentations, everyone's presentation so far today, technology is great, but it's not perfect. And it really reflects what the design team, what the engineers, what the developers, bring to the table. And they may have good intentions, but just may have unconscious biases. And so we need to train people who are, providing care at any level to really understand the data and to still have those clinical skills so that they can trust their own instincts and have some basis to question the technology if they're getting an answer that just doesn't seem right.
So I'm just reflecting on a paper that Peter, Gloria, and I wrote in one of our mind-body medicine columns of thinking about bias. And I'm just curious, because this is an integrative health conference and you have sort of mind-body strategies and you have, all these other modalities and thinking. Do you feel, or have you seen evidence of, or do you feel that the teaching of these types of strategies, say contemplative practice, can actually help both in the design of a clinical study and or help reduce unconscious bias and or help better with patient engagement in sort of clinical decision making through these large language models or the sort of AI processes? So, thoughts or reactions to that?
If you have something. I think what came to mind as you were talking about that is the mind-body techniques, right? And how is it we bring principles of mindfulness or compassion into using our technology? And one of my lab's research study questions has always been, how is it that you can create community? Can technology enhance community? And can you use it to have people feel less alone and reduce their loneliness? Going through the allopathic system for many of these patients that we work with chronic pain has been very traumatic. And as Abigail was talking about, the shame and stigma they feel going through the healthcare system. So we have been designing our interventions to enhance community and help people realize that they're not alone, that there are other people who look like them and have the same conditions that they do. And trying to figure out how to quantify that. How do we measure that? How do we measure that special sauce? Is it mixed methods, qualitative, quantitative, through objective data? We're really trying to understand that.
I think this might be relevant. So I've been thinking a lot about provider level interventions for stigma mitigation. And I think that while it's not necessarily something that needs to be delivered using a technological strategy, I think it is a good potential partner, really using some of the strategies that we know to work, this idea of metacognitive awareness or meta-emotional awareness, self-compassion, to pause and see the power differential in a dynamic with a patient that is really inherent in the construct of the patient-provider dynamic, and then look for signals in the other person that there might be some discomfort or shame or internalized stigma, and then take that as a piece of information in conjunction with whatever we're getting from other sources of information, whether that be the physician's brain, the provider's brain, or the AI tools, and then think about all of that together. But that pause that I think is very consistent with many integrated medicine strategies can enable us and providers more generally to really evaluate that other experience in the context of the other information that we're obtaining.
One of the things I was curious in preparation for our session, admittedly, I wanted to sort of check in with ChatGPT as I was preparing some of my comments. And so I'm curious, it gave me, I felt confident when it said, oh, that was a good answer. Yes, well thought. Like so when we think about some of these tools which give us responses affective, like, how do we make sense of that? Like, is that actually clinically meaningful, or is that meaningful even from a research design perspective when we're using some of these technology tools to have affirmation of our own sort of both, I guess, our own as shame and or our own confidence? And I'm just curious as to how that has been thought through. Maybe I'll start with you, Adam.
Yeah, so there is data on this, actually. So it should not surprise you that LLM-based psychotherapists do a pretty good job. Paul Barr recently had a wonderful study done via texting, so people could just text back with it. And the number of communications on average was remarkable. People loved it. Now, even talking more meta, like this is not, I heard you say tool. I don't think these are tools. I think this is epistemic. This is shifting the bounds of knowledge, because right now I'm looking at the average age in this room. We're all older. I'm sorry, guys. But young people, my goodness, young people are communicating with AIs as friends. There was an incredibly disturbing New York Times article about a kid who killed himself, committed suicide because of a relationship. Now, the Mehta thing, his dad also had an unsecured gun in the house. So, that may have been, but regardless, like these are a big part of people's lives. People are starting to have relationships with them. My kids are 4 and 5. They love ChatGPT, tells them stories. My stories are better, but ChatGPT tells them pretty good stories. Maybe because it just agrees with whatever I say. So I think it is, society is changing. People are going to have relationships with these. Chronic pain patients may prefer talking to a pain chatbot that will actually bring them more relief than a human provider. And that is something that we need to prepare for. And I think the tool framework is not actually helpful going forward because we're dealing with something much larger in our health system.
I'm going to ask the audience here. How many of you have used ChatGPT in the audience here? Raise your hand. All right.
Sorry to call everyone old.
Oh, go ahead. Speak in the mic.
Well, it's the same.
Spike Jones movie, Her. I think it's worth watching. It's quite prescient.
Again, there are mics here, so we encourage people to come up to the mics to ask questions as well. I'm going to just, we're coming up on time here for just what is the thing that you are most, in just, again, 15 seconds, or 15 or 20 seconds, what is the innovation that you're looking most forward to as you think about your own line of work, or just broadly speaking, as it relates to this dialogue on health equity?
Which direction are we starting with Dr. Chideya?
We'll talk with Dr.
I wanted time. So I'm a natural pessimist, but what I hope is for a Star Trek future where the computer can enhance the humanity and the medical relationship.
We have a study that we just submitted that is looking at people with migraines and teaching them an anti-inflammatory omega-3 rich diet. And I'm looking forward to seeing how can the technology take people into their kitchen and show them that food can be their medicine and that they can influence their own health.
So I work mostly with people who have a lot of unmet subsistence needs, marginally housed, really underserved people. And I think moving towards increased equity where we can reach people where they're at in really scalable ways to increase behavioral health equity for more people.
This is awful, but I honestly, I don't know where to start. So I need to think about it a little bit more.
All right. Well, on that note, it's time for our break. We're going to take a 15-minute break. Again, hopefully, I know all of our speakers are here, so you can feel free, those who are here in person, feel free to engage with them directly. But thank you for a wonderful start to the session.